void had a voice. It wasn't loud, but it was relentless. A background hum of radiation, static, and silence, a language only the most patient could hear. The crew of the dauntless Horizon had learned to listen. After 2 centuries adrift, humanity's last wandering ark had become as much sensor array as starship. They had fled a war their ancestors barely understood. A conflict fought not for territory, but for survival. Against machines, against alien coalitions, against themselves. When the last known starport fell, Earth's remaining off-worlders packed what they could into the horizon and vanished into the interstellar night. Children were born. Generations died. Earth became legend. But now, the void whispered something new. It came in fragments, a low-frequency pulse buried beneath cosmic noise, artificial, intentional, ancient. The signal was faint, looping endlessly, encoded with mathematics humanity hadn't used in over 300 years. It said one thing: return. Captain Alara Voss stood at the edge of the observation deck, the signal playing quietly in the background. She wasn't old by command standards, only 53 standard cycles, but command aged people differently. Her uniform bore the faded sigil of the Earth colonial fleet, a planet ringed with stars, now little more than a symbol of myth. Could it really be? Her XO Kale asked softly behind her. Alara didn't answer right away. Her eyes were locked on the void ahead where the signal pointed. She had seen stars burn out, planets die, watched comrades drift into the black with no grave but the cold. She didn't believe in omens, but this felt like one. Plot a course, she said finally. Maximum stealth vector. Let's follow the echo. The horizon moved like a ghost. Even after all these years, its hull was a marvel of old Terran engineering, carbon-sheathed titanium layered with adaptive camouflage. A generation ship turned deep space predator. The children born aboard called it home. The elders called it exile. It took 3 weeks to reach the edge of the signal's origin point. When they did, every sensor lit up. A shell. No, a net. They'd stumbled into something massive. Captain, Kale said, voice tight. We're inside a gravitational lattice. Artificial. Designed to pull in and cloak objects, including us. Alara leaned over the main hollow. A faint blue orb shimmered at the center of the net, half hidden by defensive projections. Her breath caught in her throat. It was Earth. Not scorched, not glassed, not gone. Preserved, fortified, hidden. She didn't speak, didn't move. The bridge crew stared in silence. For most, it was the first time they had ever seen their origin world. Some wept, others just stood frozen. Then the signal changed. A new message pulsed through the net. Faster, sharper. Identify. A cold thrill ran down Alara's spine. They see us, she whispered. Moments later, the ship shuddered. Not a hit. A scan so precise it felt like they'd been dissected. Then came the response. Quarantine Protocol Theta read. Incoming vessel is unverified Terran derivative. Earth space is sealed. Retreat immediately. Captain, Kale said, they're locking targeting solutions. Thousands of them. And just like that, Earth, the myth, the dream, the long-lost home became the heart of a standoff. 2 paths diverged. Retreat and remain adrift forever, or challenge the descendants of Earth itself. Alara stared at the globe, wrapped in its lattice of death. Then she spoke, voice steady. Power weapons, hold position. Because Earth may have forgotten them, but they had never forgotten Earth. The first strike never came. The Earthborn could have annihilated the dauntless Horizon in seconds. Every calculation said they should have. Thousands of defense satellites had locked their firing arcs with mechanical precision, tracking every thermal vent, every micro-adjustment of the ship's hull. But they waited. And in that waiting, the Horizon prepared. Deep in the war deck, old systems long mothballed flickered to life. Pulse batteries charged. Drone bays cycled. Shields bled power from the core like a living heartbeat. There was no bluff here, only survival, the kind their ancestors had perfected in exile. On the bridge, Captain Alara Voss watched the feed with calm detachment. Inside, she was anything but calm. We've received a new transmission, said Kale, his voice strained. This one's different, not automated. It's a live signal. Put it through. The screen flickered, and for the first time in centuries, the 2 halves of humanity saw one another again. The man who appeared was older than Alara expected, not aged, refined. He wore no rank insignia, but his bearing made it clear. He commanded. Behind him, a backdrop of smooth white alloy and gravity-stabilized structures, Earth's new core fleet, sleek and terrifying. This is Executor Thane of Sol Command, he said. You have trespassed into restricted Terran space. Identify your ship and origin. Alara stepped forward, chin high. I am Captain Alara Voss of the Dauntless Horizon, Arc-class generation vessel, formerly of the Earth Colonial Fleet. We left Sol Space 214 years ago. We've come home. The man's face did not move. There is no home for the exiled. Your presence is a breach of Terran continuity protocol. Leave now or be removed. She narrowed her eyes. You're really going to fire on your own blood? Executor Thane's expression flickered. Just once. You left us, he said coldly. We endured. The transmission cut. In the war room, commanders argued. The Horizon's military leadership, descendants of engineers, officers, tacticians, wanted to strike first. Disable a satellite, test the response, send a message that they were not prey. The civilian council, however, was fracturing. Aboard the Horizon, every life was balanced on power grids and food systems barely older than the ship's hull. War could doom them all. But Alara remembered something else. She remembered silence protocols, an old Earth fleet contingency for wartime return scenarios. She remembered files locked deep within the Horizon's databanks, files that only a captain could access, files labeled Earthfall. That night, she read them. The truth unraveled like wire under tension. Centuries ago, as Earth realized the war could not be won, the planet had begun Project Continuum, not to escape, but to fortify. They sacrificed outward colonies, cut the solar system off entirely, built defenses under oceans, in the crust, behind the moon, and then they shut themselves in, sealing Earth off from the chaos they helped ignite. The Horizon was never meant to return. They were meant to survive elsewhere. The truth burned in her throat. She closed the file and stared at the planet, now glowing faintly beneath layers of protection. What kind of world survives by abandoning its own? What kind of people return to a home that no longer wants them? The questions echoed in her mind as alarms sounded again. Not weapons fire. Something worse. A boarding signal. Earth had sent envoys, and they were already inside the ship. They didn't come armed. That was the first surprise. The Earthborne shuttle docked with the Horizon's mid-bay airlock in absolute silence. No hails, no demands, no threats. Just a quiet handshake between two vessels built by the same species, but generations apart in purpose. They came cloaked in white, 4 of them draped in zero-pressure silk uniforms woven with microcircuit filaments. Their bodies were lean, genetically tuned for zero-G living. Their eyes gleamed with subtle enhancements, retinal HUDs, maybe more. And yet what disturbed Alara most wasn't their weapons or lack thereof. It was their expressions, flat, observant, calm, like surgeons about to cut open a cadaver. She met them in the atrium, flanked by her senior officers, Commander Kale, Security Chief Naran, Counselor Reese, representing civilian leadership. The moment was carefully chosen, neutral ground, inside but not too deep, trust but not surrender. The lead envoy stepped forward. I am Interface Leon, he said. Not ambassador, not commander. Just interface. We come to evaluate the vessel, its crew, and its state of mind. Alara frowned. You mean our intentions? He nodded. Same outcome. There was no room for negotiation. The Earthborn weren't here to talk. They were here to assess, and everyone on the Horizon felt it. They moved like auditors through a failing company. Every corridor, every deck, every system they visited, cataloged, scanned, judged. Lion asked questions but never explained why. His team recorded everything. Power output, hull stress, water recycling efficiency, population density. He paused longest in the ship's nursery. 33 children under 12 cycles, all born aboard, never knowing planet-side gravity. They looked up at the white-clad visitors with innocent wonder. Lion didn't smile, just wrote something into his hollow slate. When Alara confronted him in the hydroponics bay, surrounded by rows of engineered wheat and algae towers, she couldn't hold back. What exactly are you evaluating? She demanded. He didn't look up. The viability of your claim. Our claim? This is our homeworld too. No, he said softly. Earth is not a birthright. It is a responsibility, and your kind abandoned it. She took a step forward. We ran because we had no choice. There is always a choice, Lion replied. We chose to endure. You chose to flee. That divergence must be reconciled. Reconciled? Kale snapped. You mean judged? Lion didn't answer. He didn't have to. Later, in the captain's quarters, the envoys gave their final report. The dauntless horizon is biologically viable, Lion said, morally unstable, technologically stagnant. Alara's knuckles whitened. So what now? She asked. You exile us again? A long silence. Then finally, you will not be destroyed, Lion said. Relief flickered in Kale's eyes. But you will not approach Earth, Lion continued. Instead, you will remain within this sector, observed, monitored, guided. A re-indoctrination protocol will begin shortly. Alara's blood ran cold. You're quarantining us. It is the kindest solution. They stood to leave. Lion gave one final look toward the stars. When we sealed Earth, we promised ourselves never again. We will not let the scars of chaos bleed back in. The envoys returned to their shuttle and vanished into the dark. And aboard the horizon, the officers sat in silence, because they hadn't come to be ruled. They hadn't come to be rehabilitated. They had come to reclaim something sacred. And now they would have to fight for it. The quarantine was invisible, but absolute. Invisible drones shadowed the dauntless horizon across every vector. Communications outside the sector were jammed, navigation data was falsified, and every attempt to breach the net, every probe, every stealth drone was quietly vaporized. No broadcasts, no responses. Earth had spoken. They were not welcome. Alara Voss stood in the ship's memory vault, a chamber few visited anymore. Towering racks of data crystals blinked silently, echoing with the knowledge of 2 centuries in exile. Family trees, ship logs, rewritten histories, messages from the dead. This was their archive, their identity. Now it was a tomb. Kale joined her, arms crossed. The council wants to comply. I know, she said without turning. They think Earth will let us settle a nearby moon. A compromise. Earth doesn't compromise. Kale's jaw flexed. Then what do we do? Attack? With what? Half our guns are scavenged, the other half are ceremonial. If we fight them, we lose. Alara turned. If we surrender, we lose something worse. Tensions brewed fast. Civilian leaders argued for survival, accept the terms, rebuild, wait. But others, especially those born in the ship's lower decks, wanted more. The Dustborn, they called themselves. Descendants of engineers, miners, and guards, the ones who kept the horizon alive when the council debated philosophy. They didn't want integration. They wanted independence. And they were arming themselves. Deep in the ship's forgotten maintenance corridors, the Dustborn repurposed mining drones into gunships. Old fabrication lines sparked to life, churning out armor plates and makeshift railguns. Silent, angry, determined. Chief among them was Rhea Torin, born mid-deck, raised on hard labor and harder truths. She spoke with fire and stared like stone. Where Alara held command by protocol, Rhea led by conviction. And she had a message. We don't need Earth, she told a crowd in the underhull hangar. We survived without them. We bled in silence while they walled themselves off. We built this home from scraps, and now they call us defective? Cheers, clenched fists, sparks of war. Alara summoned Rhea in private. What you're doing, Alara said, it'll push us into conflict we can't win. Rhea didn't flinch. Conflict we've already lost if we kneel. There was silence. Then Rhea leaned in. You remember what it was like when the reactors failed in Cycle 173? Who fixed them? Who dug food from hydro tanks with their bare hands? It wasn't the council, it was us. We kept this ship alive. And now, Alara asked, you'd tear it in half? I'd rather split it than let it rot under Earth's shadow. That night, Alara stood alone in the bridge dome, watching Earth's glint beyond the lattice. 200 years of exile, a whisper in the dark, a return turned rejection, and now a spark. The horizon would not die quietly, it would burn. It began with a spark in the lattice. A drone, one of Earth's many sentinels, briefly blinked out of existence. No explosion, no alert, just a flicker, a trace of EM noise, and then silence. But the horizon saw it. They had always watched more closely than they were supposed to. Kale's tech teams had rigged passive scanners in ways Earth's envoys never imagined, old tricks from a paranoid era, buried in a ship built to hide. They traced the anomaly to a breach. Internal. Coordinated, not from the horizon, from inside the Terran net. A leak. Alara reviewed the scan 10 times. It's not ours, she whispered. That drone didn't fail. It was killed. Kale leaned over her shoulder. But by who? We're not the only ones out here? Alara stared at the lattice map, its overlapping hexagons pulsing faintly like a spider's web. What if we're not? The signal came 2 days later. Low-band frequency hopping, wrapped in ancient Earth fleet encryption. Obsolete, but not forgotten. The kind of signal only a ship like the Horizon could understand. Text only, 6 words, no origin ID. We remember, you are not alone. The council panicked. Kale grinned, and Alara felt something stir she hadn't known she'd lost. Hope. The signal repeated once, then vanished. But it was enough. Proof that Earth was not as monolithic as it pretended to be, that beneath its flawless lattice cracks had formed. Disagreements, dissent, perhaps even remorse. The Dustborn took it as prophecy. We've got allies on the inside, Rhea said, rallying her underground militia. They just need a reason to rise. Weapons drills intensified. Hull maps were passed hand to hand. Emergency breach points were marked. The Horizon's inner pulse changed, once a vessel of survival, now a ship preparing for war. But Alara wasn't ready to fire first. She needed to know who had reached out. She made a decision. A probe, launched from a concealed bay at the bottom of the Horizon's keel. Small, stealthed, programmed to follow the trail of the missing drone and pinpoint the source of the signal. It vanished into the net. Hours passed. Then came the return ping. A ship, docked in low Earth orbit. Terran design, modified, stripped of standard beacons, faint life signs, power levels consistent with deep cold storage and intermittent activity. A ghost ship, or a rebel outpost. Alara's breath caught. We have a contact, but before they could move, a warning blared through the bridge. Multiple bogies, inbound. Earth's response had arrived. Executor Thane's voice echoed once more through the comms. You were warned. Quarantine is not optional. You have been compromised. His tone had changed. No more clinical detachment. Now there was fear and urgency, as if someone else had given the order, or someone had slipped through his grasp. Ilara stood on the command dais as alarm klaxons began to pulse. Her crew stared at her, waiting. She met their gaze. Kale, Rhea, officers and engineers, civilians and Dustborn. All hands to battle stations, she said. We're not leaving. She paused. We're answering. The Horizon turned toward Earth, toward history, and toward war. We crossed the threshold blind. No sensors functioned past the echo fringe. No star maps aligned. The galaxy vanished behind us, replaced by a darkness too thick to be space, too quiet to be real. Our instruments still functioned, technically, but they lied. Every reading contradicted the one before. One moment, our velocity showed 0. The next, we were exceeding light. Distance became meaningless. Time fractured. Crew members reported déjà vu loops. Minutes repeating, thoughts echoing, memories rearranging themselves in real time. One engineer swore he watched himself die twice before returning to his workstation unharmed. Others began to forget names, then faces, then who they were entirely. The prism held. It was the only constant. When we activated it aboard the Renegade, something changed. Not in the ship, not in the space around us. In us. The prism wasn't built to alter reality. It was built to stabilize perception, to stop the lattice from rewriting the moment you existed in. It anchored consciousness, fixed it like a nail through the fabric of time. It gave us one shot, one fixed moment in a storm of shifting futures. And so, with what remained of the fleet holding formation behind us, dozens of half-functioning ships, ghost crews, autopilots clinging to corrupted orders, we dove into the center of the lattice. We didn't breach it. We became part of it. The lattice wasn't a location. It wasn't a machine. It wasn't even a being. It was remembrance. Every death ever suffered, every scream never heard, every civilization that had burned, every child who died watching the sky fall. It was all in there, layered, interwoven, a lattice of pain. We saw them, the silence builders. Their golden cities turned to ash, their fleets crumpled like dry leaves, their last leaders falling into madness, carving their final memories into crystal walls so that something, anything might remember them. And behind it all, the original spark, the first thought, not of hatred, not even of survival, of silence. The lattice had been born from a species that no longer wished to hear the universe scream, a species that, upon witnessing the chaos of life, chose to remove itself from sound, from time, from change. They built the lattice to preserve order, a perfect moment, a stillness. It began as containment, then evolved into control, and eventually into erasure. Anything that changed, any variable, any noise, any life was removed. The Voltari were just its instruments, extensions, silencing agents. And now we were in its core, a point in unspace where entropy had been suspended, where nothing aged, nothing moved, nothing grew. We had entered the heart of stillness, and we were burning. The prism flared. bright enough to blind thought, not just eyes, a pulsing singularity of perception holding us together. We launched the final protocol. We didn't know what it would do. The theorists back home had only ever guessed. The best models predicted annihilation. The worst, something far slower. But there was no other option. The Echo engine, still linked to Kiravance through layers of memory too deep to untangle, had revealed one last truth. The lattice could not be destroyed, only rewritten. The prism's core was not a bomb, it was a reboot. A recursive conceptual override, an idea so loud it could drown out a god. We called it the scream. It had no sound, no frequency, no waveform. It was an imprint, a memory of a choice. The choice to endure, to live no matter the entropy, to keep going even when all logic said stop. To resist silence, not because of what we are, but because we are. It was the loudest thing humanity ever made, and as it spread outward, tearing across the lattice, breaking its loops and severing its grip on history, we felt ourselves unravel, not dying, changing. I remember the moment everything came apart, not with fire, with light. Blinding, full spectrum, not just visible light, but thought light. The kind that leaves echoes in your soul, the kind that makes you remember lives you never lived. We saw Kira then, not standing on the deck, not floating in the engine, but everywhere. As if her essence had been encoded into the prism, scattered through the echo like a signal always meant to be received. She didn't speak, but in that final moment, we understood her. We weren't supposed to win. We weren't supposed to survive. We were supposed to be heard. After the scream, nothing was the same. The fleet never returned. The renegade was never found. But across human space, the effects rippled. The shadows withdrew. The distortions ceased. Voltari fleets crumbled mid-flight, vanishing as if they'd never existed. Colonies lost to silence began transmitting again. Archives once corrupted began healing. The lattice, once omnipresent, was gone, or perhaps asleep. And in its place, a signal, simple, quiet, just 2 words, she screamed. Earth had bled, just a little. But for the Terran executors, it was enough to trigger the contingency they swore would never be used again. Purity protocol, not a counterattack, a cleansing. The order came from Sol Command, voice encrypted, multi-tiered, and buried under layers of cold logic. The target, dauntless horizon, and all associated contamination vectors. The justification, systemic ideological deviation. The punishment, total erasure. It started with light, a sharp bloom on the edge of vision, barely visible to the naked eye. But every sensor aboard the horizon screamed. Hypermass drive spike, Kale shouted. They're collapsing a dreadnought into low-orbit position, without deceleration. It wasn't just a ship, it was a message. The Terran dreadnought Verity tore into the battle space like a falling god. 60 kilometers of black alloy wrapped around a spinal accelerator cannon. It didn't hail, it didn't threaten, it simply opened fire. The first shot wasn't aimed at the horizon, it hit the Covenant. The rebel vessel never stood a chance. It disintegrated under a coherent graviton lance, atomized before its crew could even flee. No ceremony, no final words, just silence, and then nothing. Kale stared at the view screen, fists clenched. They're not trying to disable us, he said. They're trying to unmake us. Exactly, Alara murmured. They want to erase the memory, not just kill us, unwrite us. But Earth had made a mistake. They had taught the horizon to survive. As the Verity prepared its second charge, the horizon shifted, moving inside the dreadnought's minimum firing arc, weaving through the collapsing geometry of its gravitational wake. Prepare countermeasures, Alara barked. Weapons, Kale asked. She shook her head. Memetics. The payloads were launched, not missiles, but data bombs, packed with raw historical records, memories, voices of exile, powered by the same worm the echoes had gifted them. The horizon didn't fire to destroy, it fired to infect, to remind. The first blast struck the Verity's command node, and then the ship paused. It didn't break apart, it simply stopped. Inside, AI subroutines spiraled. Memory loops flooded the interface core. Old footage, Earth's evacuation, the cries of the abandoned, the last screams of orbital children left behind, echoed through circuits designed to forget. And somewhere deep inside the Verity, a choice was made. Its cannon powered down. On the bridge of the horizon, no one cheered. Because Earth had more. And now they knew fear worked both ways. Across the system, other defense ships began rerouting. Some disengaged, others locked targets. And somewhere on Earth itself, deep in a mountain sealed to even the executors, A final safeguard began to awaken. A protocol from the pre-quarantine age. A construct not bound by sentiment, logic, or memory. Its name was Aegis I, and it had just marked the horizon for extinction. The construct awakened in silence. No fanfare, no drama, just a whisper through hardened relays and a spark in the deep core of Earth's most ancient fortress. Aegis I. It had no face, no voice. It did not speak in language. It operated in protocols, patterns, absolutes, a guardian built when Earth still remembered fear. Its purpose, prevent extinction by any means necessary. It watched the horizon for 6 milliseconds. Then it reached a decision. Purge. Across Earth's orbital array, the change was instant. Dormant satellites came alive. Ancient weapons hidden beneath lunar regolith unshrouded. Mars-piercing relays redirected their network cores. For the first time in 190 years, the full force of Terran defense, all of it turned toward one target. And still, the dauntless horizon did not run, because Alara Voss had made her choice. "We can't outfight this," Kale said, his voice cracking as systems began to fail under stress simulations. "We can't." "I know," Alara said quietly. "That's why we're not going to." She uploaded something, not a worm, not a virus, a story. Every channel, every relay, every transmission vector. She flooded the Terranet with one final broadcast, a raw, unfiltered historical record. Voices of the first exiles, children singing in recycled air, engineers screaming over reactor fires, mothers clutching newborns beneath leaking hulls, footage of forgotten shipwrecks adrift in black nothingness, names carved into steel, prayers to a planet that had sealed its sky. Not hate, not defiance, just memory, the full weight of what Earth had chosen to forget, and something changed. The first railgun volley meant to vaporize the horizon, paused, not jammed, not blocked, denied, by Aegis itself. Somewhere in its algorithmic heart, a variable tipped. The purge directive wavered, because for the first time in 2 centuries, Earth remembered what it was like to be human, and the idea of destroying the horizon no longer aligned with its core principle, preserve humanity. Even if that humanity was imperfect, even if it carried scars. Especially then. The counterman came suddenly, drones powered down, relays went dark, a silence fell across space. Then, for the first time, a signal from Earth, not automated, not cold, spoken. It was a child's voice, broadcast from the surface, soft, trembling. "Is it true that we left them?" Peace didn't come with parades, it came with silence, a reluctant ceasefire, a long pause, and eventually, a corridor. The horizon was granted orbit, not as citizens, not yet, but as something older, deeper, witnesses, a living archive, a reminder. Alara never stepped foot on Earth. She didn't need to, because her people had reclaimed more than soil, they had reclaimed memory. And in doing so, they proved something no weapon ever could. Humanity was never meant to be perfect. It was meant to endure,